This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders Day. I'm honored to have Joe Evangelisti on the show. He is one of the best coaches, mentors when it comes to real estate development, and we're going to talk a lot about that, about investment in that path, and how his career has led into that. Anyway, with all that being said, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me on.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into development.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people I really started as a construction guy my whole life. My dad's been a general contractor turned builder when I was a teenager, and so I've always been on job sites, always swinging the hammer, always hanging drywall, stuff like that. And then I got lucky enough to go into the military after high school and do construction in the military. So I worked for the U.S. Navy Seabees, which are the construction battalions of the Navy. A lot of people don't even know they exist, but they go everywhere by air, and they build all over the world, and spent about 6 years doing that, and ultimately led me back to single family real estate development back in New Jersey, where I'm from.
So when it comes to building in the Navy, I guess I never really thought about it, but somebody's got to build the bases, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you guys were doing?
Yeah, so think about like more like forward operating bases. So,
Mhm.
when the Marines deploy, for example, to the desert, the Seabees might go out there and stand up the forward operating base and then protect it while the Marines are out there doing their thing during the day. That's kind of one of the primary focuses of the Seabees. But, we'll build just about anything, anywhere, bridges, roads, runways, you name it.
So when you came back and you got into development in New Jersey, what was that like, and what was that transition?
Yeah, that was a big transition for myself because it was really the first time. I guess I should bring it back. My dad was the first entrepreneur in my family, right? So
Mhm.
my grandparents were Sicilian immigrants, and so my dad was the first one to say, "I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to go start my own business."
Uh-huh.
And so I kind of knew in the back of my mind I was either one day going to work with my dad or take over his business or be an entrepreneur in some way. So the military allowed me to build some good leadership skills and develop discipline and things like that. But ultimately, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So coming back, I kind of combined those two worlds. I worked for my dad for a little bit and started flipping houses kind of on the side while it was nights and weekends.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because a lot of our listeners are in tech, and there's this, I don't know if it's an inherent drive for a lot of tech people to become entrepreneurs and start our own thing.
Sure.
But what kind of work do you have to do in order to kind of start doing that? You mentioned flipping houses and doing things kind of almost, it sounds like doing things on the side to kind of generate some revenue and generate
Yeah.
some wealth to do that.
Yeah, for me, my old mentor used to say the art is in the start, right? And I think
Mm.
that's probably true for most things. I just started taking action. I didn't really set out to be some big developer. I didn't set out to be. I certainly didn't want to be a landlord at the time. I thought I was just going to flip houses and make money. But I started getting into the industry in 2007. So arguably, maybe the second worst time ever to try to invest in real estate. And so a lot of it was trial and error, figuring it out. I call it course correction now, and pivoting and trying to just kind of work through problems. And I think that's one of the things, the CBs taught me that their motto is can do. And that they have this slogan that I think I'm going to botch this, but I think they say the difficult we do in a day, the impossible takes a little longer. So it's just about solving problems. And I think that's really entrepreneurism in a nutshell is can I solve problems and can I continue to solve problems on a daily basis, whether I feel good, bad, or indifferent?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, when it comes to, I guess you said you kind of started investing at one of the worst times ever. We had,
Yeah.
the housing bubble kind of collapsed right around then.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that?
those trials and that difficult time?
Yeah, I learned a lot of things. I mean, I think some of the things looking back on it is realizing that, insurmountable problems and these scary things that keep us up at night are things that can be fixed. I mean, the first three houses we had flipped, when I say flipped, we rehabbed them and made them new again. And we thought we could sell them for a bunch of money and we couldn't. And so really the first lesson I had to learn was pivoting to putting tenants in place, becoming a landlord, learning, leases and all that kind of good stuff. And then basically begging the bank to give me long-term fixed debt on the property because we couldn't sell them for, even break even at the time. So that was a huge lesson, and it kept me up many many nights. And now I look back, and we do refis on a monthly basis, so it doesn't seem like a big deal. But it's a lot of times those insurmountable issues are things that somebody else has been through, and you just got to figure out how to work through it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In your bio, you talk a lot about being part of group trainings and mastermind groups and learning from coaching that way. How important is it to have, I guess, a community around you to learn from?
Yeah, it's so true. It's John, it's absolutely, one of my MOs, and it's the, you become like the five people you surround yourself with. Now,
Mm.
I think that's more like 20 or 30 people because, your circle's going to grow as you get as you get bigger and do more things. But, ultimately I could not do it if I didn't have the people around me that have either been there, done that, or, gave me great advice to overcome it. That doesn't mean it doesn't come with bad. Sometimes you get bad advice, sometimes you do bad deals, but ultimately, if you get surrounded by the right core group of people and you're taking your advice and you're, getting motivated and inspired by those people, then, I think it certainly helps create the trajectory you're trying to go down.
Mhm. So one of the things that you've done is kind of niche down when it comes to self storage. What's the, how did you figure that out?
Yeah, that was really a product of driving ourselves insane, right? So we were, at the time, we were flipping 88 houses. I think we did our last year. We flipped, and I remember sitting down with my COO at the time and saying, like, okay, it's the end of the year. What do we want to do next year? Do we want to do 100? Do we want to do 110? And he looked at me dead in the eyes, man, and he was like, I don't ever want to do 88 again. you know? And that was the moment it kind of hit me like, man, thank God you said it. Cause I feel like, sometimes our ego gets in the way and we try to do things that, we're just not physically made for. We don't really mentally want to do, but we kind of convince ourselves it's the goal. But that was when we had a real moment of kind of introspection and realized like there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different industry or a different way that we can build and we can create. And we dug around a lot of different industries. We looked at apartments. We looked at office at the time. Thank God we didn't do that. And then we landed on self storage. And it was amazing. For a while we were able to build, one facility would be the equivalent of 100 houses that we would flip as far as, outcome and profit and things like that. And it's not all rainbows and unicorns. I mean, again, at that time, that was right when COVID hit. About 3 years later, that entire industry got very, very saturated with, a lot of other apartment investors and things like that transitioning into storage. And now it's a pretty tough industry to be in. But at the time, it worked really, really well. It helped us pivot. It helped us go bigger, and it really turned us into commercial developers. Before that, the biggest thing I had built was a house, and then we jumped right into 100,000 square foot self storage facilities.
Yeah, I think you hit that timing just right with that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, it would have been disastrous to go into office space right before COVID.
absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you teach people about when it comes to helping them get into investments and get into real estate or get into, where should someone start?
Yeah, really, my byproduct of teaching came from just adding lots and lots of properties until enough people kind of asked me, "How did you do it?" Right? And I think that's, in my mind, that's where really good coaching comes from is applicable real life circumstances. And so, most of my coaching clients are they're all from different walks of life. Insurance providers, lawyers, doctors, dentists, things like that. But they want to find that transition into wealth building and real estate. And so it's kind of a really easy transition to, create a side gig, whether it's, a side hustle or it becomes a full-time hustle into commercial real estate. And so that's kind of where my passion is. And for most of my coaching clients, I'm a joint venture partner or I'm a lender. I'm involved somehow in the deal. And to me, that's like double fulfilling because I get to teach somebody and I get to participate at the same time.
Yeah, I think it also shows that you have some skin in the game. You're not just lip service. You're actually going to put some money money up to it as
That's
well.
right. Yeah, that's right.
So, when someone is interested in getting started, do you think they should start the way you did with flipping houses, or do you think you should go more into a commercial space, or is it different for each person?
Yeah, I think it's, I hate to say it, but I think it's really different for each person. I'll give you some examples. If I was really young and I wanted to get into real estate investing and I had a full-time W-2 and I had some money saved up, I think house hacking is one of the best ways to get into the real estate investing game. And what I mean by that is, you buy a 2, 3, 4 unit multi-unit residential property, you live in one of the units. You don't have a big family maybe at the time, or you don't need a lot of space. You could even go as far as to get roommates to offset your expenses. But your tenants can help pay all or most of your mortgage. And then you work your way up. Maybe you do it again. Maybe you do it 2, 3 times. Somebody in their young 20s could wake up at 30 years old with 20, 30 units very, very easily just by doing that while they have a full-time job. Now the flip side is maybe you have one of my students right now, as an example, just sold his dental practice and he made a bunch of money. And so for him, house hacking is not exactly the best solution, but we're doing some medical office developments together. So in that case, money's a little bit more easy to he's already made his money. He's got plenty set aside. He's got a great lifestyle. He's semi-retired. And now he wants to transition into doing big commercial assets. So I think for everybody, they're going to have their own, place in life that they're at. And it depends. Do they want to go all in? Do they want to do it part time, or do they want to create a side hustle? I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I want to dig into like you mentioned, house hacking as kind of one step where you kind of live in there. And I guess on the side, you're managing, sending out bills for the tenants and making sure,
Yep.
if you're there, you kind of know what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
but when you grow those units and you're not there, how involved do you have to be to make sure that, you have the right tenants in there? They're not, destroying your place. That's one of the fears that a lot of people have with rentals is that the tenant's going to destroy the place.
Yeah, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 12. I would be very involved. And I've gotten very lucky. Most of my residential portfolio is with a business partner that I've been with for 20 years. In fact, he's my best friend since we were 9 years old.
Mm.
And so he is the maintenance and management side of things, and I'm the acquisitions and kind of, finding new deals side of things. And it's a really, really good partnership in that regard. Otherwise, I would be full time in the management game. And so I think you have to be very active. Now, that said, I think there's different types of tenants. Residential tends to be a lot more involved. I always tell people like, refrigerators don't break except for nights and weekends. You get
Mhm.
that call at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Whereas commercial tenants are a little different animal. They tend to be more professional. They only kind of work usually Monday through Friday. So you're not getting a lot of these crazy night weekend calls. But yeah, you have to be very active. I think you have to know your asset. I think you have to understand your tenancy. I think you have to protect your downside and make sure you put good people in place. And ultimately, you have to treat it like a business. I think a lot of people get stuck in the emotional aspect of single family rentals, particularly when, people can't pay rent or they're behind. It's got to be business first, or, the whole ship could go down because of 1 or 2 units.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about what one of your best success cases that you've had.
Yeah, I've had many successes. I've had many failures. Some of our best success cases have been in the storage business, developing large self-storage. But, I'm doing again, that medical office I just mentioned we're doing right now is gonna, I think, turn out to be one of the best deals per capita that we've done. And it just happens to be another type of distressed real estate. A lot of people think distressed real estate, they think death and divorce and inherited properties and things like that, which is true. But one thing that I think a lot of single family investors, if they knew this, the same stuff happens in commercial, and the numbers are just a little bit bigger. So I think that, if you have the wherewithal and a little bit of experience under your belt, I would transition to commercial sooner than later.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when it comes to commercial, I think just having that more professional sense and that more professional client. Also, not only is it bigger numbers, but it's also a better lifestyle.
Yeah.
Not having to
Yeah.
deal with some of the other things.
Yeah, and again, you're negotiating with professionals. If that person owned a 15,000 square foot medical office, they're probably a semi-professional landlord, whether that's all they owned or they had a few units. So when you're negotiating with them, there's creative financing becomes a lot more opportunistic. They understand that, quote unquote, the game a little bit better. When you're negotiating with a seller of a single family that's been there for 40 years, it's a very emotional transaction, usually. Or it can be, I should say. It's not always emotional, but sometimes it is. I find it's less likely that emotions play a part in commercial. It's more business oriented and it's, more numbers based.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where does this, medical park and things kind of open you guys up to for the future?
Yeah, that's really it's a great question. I am starting to dive deeper into triple net type opportunities, and what that means for your listeners that don't know is basically the tenant pays all the overhead, right? So your rent is a fixed number, and you can justify and determine valuation based on that rent, whereas the taxes and the snow removal and the landscaping and the common area heat, depending on how your lease is written, it might be paid for by your tenant. So it makes it a much more cleaner deal, in my opinion. The returns are usually a little bit better, and there's less likelihood of, I missed an expense, kind of thing popping up. So that's kind of where we've pivoted a little bit in the last year or two, is trying to find more triple net assets, whether they're single tenant or multi tenant. I think the medical office and the flex space type real estate is actually in a really good position right now if you can find it at the right number.
So, do you see like more of these office spaces that kind of had some trouble during COVID pivoting into medical spaces or flex spaces?
Yeah, I see that, and I also see a lot of maybe older medical office inventory that's just kind of dated and beat up. And again, we're dealing with the baby boomers that are starting to retire at a massive rate. So you have a lot of these doctors and dentists and what have you that are retiring, and maybe they have an office that hasn't been updated in 30 years, and you can do a light refresh and you can put a new medical office in there, a tenant that's going to pay you at a much higher level. I think that opportunity is going to continue to exist. I don't think medicine is going away. It's doing nothing but growing. And so I would just prefer to focus on office in that regard before I would do like, a general practice office where obviously that segment's getting beat up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I definitely think that's going to be a growing place because, like you said, we have a lot of aging people, which they need care, and
Mhm.
that mean and it's one of those things you really can't do, all the time virtual. I guess you can have a virtual appointment here and there, but for the most part, you have to physically see the patient.
Yeah, they're gonna physically see patients, and you hit the nail on the head. How many people are going virtual or have gone virtual already? No one has a crystal ball, but I can't imagine AI is going to put more people in offices. I think it'll probably
Yeah.
replace some of those people. So again, I don't think medicine that changes anytime in the near future. I hope I'm right, but yeah, doctors want to see people in person. They need to touch you and get your blood pressure and check your temperature and all that kind of good stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it has to happen in person, and I think that'll continue for quite a while.
Yeah, same thing with dentists, right? They have to clean your teeth in first.
That's right. There's no virtual Zoom call for your teeth cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, this has been a fun conversation. How can people learn more about investments and reach out to you and connect if they're interested in maybe doing a deal or learning more about your coaching?
Yeah, a simple website. It's called legacybuilder.coach. Like the idea behind it is helping people build legacy through financial freedom and creating wealth in real estate. So they can join the website there. We do generally free newsletters and blogs and information. And if they want to reach out, there's a portal on there to send me a message directly, and I'm happy to hop on a call with them.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate having you on the show. I'm gonna link all that too in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can go there and click through and connect that way.
Appreciate it, John. Thanks for having me on.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.